Job changer, a special profession, where a person can switch to any job he desires. This is the story of Zozo Amashiki's career. Tokyo, Japan. Zozo Amashiki entered the headquarters of a large corporation with an annual revenue of 300 billion yen. He noticed the transparent glass walls and the lush greenery inside the building. As he expected, such an important office must have elegance and professionalism. Amashiki believes that the entrance of an office plays an essential role in creating the image of a company, just like the entrance of a house. The way it is arranged reflects the sincerity of the occupants. Zozo Amashiki, a professional job hopper, who has walked through countless entrances of large companies, always in neat and stylish clothes. He came to this company to attend the final interview. Normally, job hopper is understood as changing jobs frequently, but in his case, he did it to get better conditions and hone his skills. Always aiming for new heights, he has worked for many large companies, but the skills that those companies can bring are gradually becoming limited. Therefore, he is now aiming for this large corporation. Standing in front of the mirror, he adjusted his hair and checked his friendly smile. Satisfied with what he saw, he felt more confident. After passing a series of strict evaluation rounds, he finally reached the final interview. The screening process was really harsh, and many people were eliminated. Now, all that remains is to pass this interview, and he will complete the job transition process. Although he can anticipate some of the questions, he remains ready to face any challenge. The interviewers might ask tough questions, and he understands that not everything will go as planned. When the receptionist signaled him to enter the interview room, Amashiki stood up confidently, telling himself that his extensive career experience was enough to handle the situation. He was sure that his skills would be useful even in a large corporation. Determined, the young job hopper opened the door, but instead of an interview room as he expected, he was greeted by a vast expanse of grassland. Confused, he thought he had entered the wrong room and was looking at the green space that some large corporations integrate into their workplaces to provide relaxation for their employees. Realizing his absent-mindedness, he thought to himself that he must have accidentally entered another room without noticing. He turned back to open the door to return to the waiting room, but what he saw was an empty space that stretched on forever. Calming himself, he told himself that he had wandered into an unfamiliar place. However, that calmness did not last long as he quickly fell into a panic, holding his head in despair, wondering where he was and what had happened to his last interview. Noticing that his skin looked unusually smooth, smoother than before, Amashiki quickly took a selfie. Shocked, he realized that he had become younger, looking no different than when he was 18. But as a habit, he immediately thought that this was a great advantage in his career. Obviously, an 18-year-old with his qualifications and experience would be a dream come true for any company. However, he quickly pulled himself back to reality and realized that now was not the time to think that way. Amashiki wondered if a place like this existed in Japan, or if he was even there anymore. Looking around, he discovered plants and creatures he had never seen before. That was when he realized a shocking truth. He had been transported to another world. Isekai. Recognizing this was not difficult for him, as it was a familiar plot in the game, an anime he had watched while in Japan. Therefore, his conclusion became obvious and natural. Touching his breast pocket, he found a strange plaque. When enabled, it acts as a status display window. Checking the contents, he was amazed to see his abilities reflected in the numbers. Amashiki realized that he possessed extraordinary magical powers, but his physical stats were rather weak, befitting someone who only exercised to stay healthy and enjoyed the life of a typical office worker. Amashiki became curious when he saw that his job was listed as job changer. When he clicked on that tab, he discovered that he could change to any job in this world, for the price of only spending a little MP, magical power. A series of questions rushed into Amashiki's mind. Was this job unique and only for him due to his history of job hopping? How did the interview location connect to another world? He briefly thought about waiting to see if other candidates would appear, or if someone else like the second player would appear here, but he quickly dismissed the idea, knowing that it would all be over if he ran out of water, and clinging to that single clue was not the way to go. Amashiki realized that he could not stand still. His personality did not allow for passivity, as he always believed that somehow, everything would work out. Amashiki was someone who was always ready to act and move forward, no matter how ambiguous the situation, while keeping a positive spirit. His aggressive attitude was quickly shattered when he ran straight into a giant praying mantis. As soon as he spotted him, the praying mantis rushed in pursuit, putting him in a dangerous situation. Amashiki realized that his strategy had backfired spectacularly. Despite his best efforts, he could not outrun the praying mantis. Changing tactics, he turned to face it under a tall tree, trying to find a way to talk or negotiate his way out of the situation. But this effort was in vain as he barely dodged the mantis attack. The mantis slash broke the tree behind him, then it continued to climb the tree before falling to the ground with a loud bang. Looking at the scene of destruction, Amashiki bitterly realized that there was no way to negotiate with such a creature. As the mantis stood tall and menacing above him, he understood that if he remained motionless, death was inevitable. In desperation, he frantically wondered what he could do to save himself. He briefly thought about finding a weapon, but then quickly remembered the power to change jobs he possessed. In desperation, he pulled out his status plate, activated it, and shouted a request to change jobs. He chose to become a mage. Instantly, he was surrounded by mystical symbols that represented the magic of this world. A new source of power surged within him, and with it, the knowledge and techniques of a magician automatically flowed into his mind. He now felt the use of magic as if he had practiced it all his life. With a mixture of confidence and despair, he raised his hand, activated a magic circle, and launched a fireball straight at the approaching mantis. The mantis was completely caught off guard by this attack, and was instantly engulfed in flames and reduced to a pile of ashes. Amashiki stood there, stunned, completely caught in the shock of what had just happened, trying to process everything in his mind. Amashiki raised his fist in triumph, but then looked at his hand in confusion. He had just changed his job and was already able to use magic. Was this the true power of a job changer? Amashiki's thoughts were quickly interrupted by a lively melody that came from nowhere. He soon realized that it was a sign that he had leveled up after defeating the mantis. Checking the status window, he realized that this world was like a game. However, when he looked at the mantis ashes, he realized that only the system here was like a game, as everything was terrifyingly realistic. Amashiki could still feel the heat from the magic he had just used and remembered that he had almost been beheaded earlier. At this moment, Amashiki understood an important truth. If he treated this world as just a game and acted carelessly, the price he would pay would be his life. This is no joke. You have to face this new reality seriously, he shouted as he looked up at the sky, declaring that he had spent his entire career working for larger companies, hoping for a better life. He then paused, pointing out that his career was built to climb the ladder of modern corporate Japan. Now, he wondered if that was still worth it in a world filled with monsters and magic. After some reflection, he came to the conclusion that all the efforts he had put in up until now had been for naught. A feeling of disappointment filled him. The young man who had once been a rising star in the corporate world now fell to his knees, feeling reduced to a mere human being in an unfamiliar world. Gritting his teeth, he told himself that he had to start over from scratch. With the power of the job changer, he could become any profession he wished. His previous fighting experience with the mantis had clearly shown him the importance of this power. The power of the main professions was the core in this world, so it was logical that if he could upgrade various professions, he could demonstrate his power anywhere. Having made his decision, Amashiki stood up with determination, determined to master all the professions in this world. Sitting under the shade of the trees, he summoned a water ball from the air with his magic power, letting it appear in the palm of his hand. Thanks to his magic, he no longer had to worry about the lack of water, so he began to move on to solving other problems. The presence of monsters made camping outdoors impossible at the moment, and basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter were still essentials. With determination, he aimed to find a settlement. Amashiki considered changing his profession once again to one that could be useful in the current situation. Opening the status window, he saw that he had spent 20 MP on his previous job change, in addition to the MP used for the fireball in the battle with the mantis, and even more for the water magic. Thanks to the mage's passive skill, his MP was slowly recovering. This led him to the conclusion that there was no need to be too frugal in changing his profession. He began to skim through the list of professions until he found a suitable one. As soon as he chose the hunter profession, his senses immediately became extraordinarily sharp, allowing him to easily detect abnormalities in nature. Amashiki began to use his keen sense of smell to search for clues. Using his keen sense of sight and hearing, Amashiki discovered faint traces of human footprints in the grass, along with traces of blood on the underside of the leaves. The blood had almost seeped into the ground, indicating that it had been shed about 2 days ago. The footprints of humans and wolf-like creatures seemed to indicate that a hunt or battle had taken place here. Regardless, Amashiki concluded that he might be able to find a settlement if he followed these traces. Grabbing his satchel, he eagerly set off through the dense forest until he stood before a well-defended village in an open area. Amashiki felt relieved, not minding that this was a small village instead of a town like he had expected. Seeing the residents walking about, he couldn't believe how happy he felt to see humans again. Without needing to search further in the forest, Amashiki immediately changed his profession back to a shaman, ready to face new challenges. A young boy wearing a headband was guarding the entrance to the village, holding a crude spear. Amashiki adjusted his tie, approaching the boy with his most professional smile. However, instead of being greeted, he only received strange looks. Noticing that his attire seemed out of place, the gatekeeper asked who he was. Understanding that his appearance was the reason for the boy's suspicion, Amashiki got straight to the point, introducing himself and claiming to be a wandering mage. The boy did not believe him, asserting that it was impossible for a practitioner to come to such a remote place. He then asked Amashiki to show him his status plate as proof. Causing the confused young man to pull the plate out of his breast pocket, Amashiki dutifully presented his status plate to the gatekeeper. The boy was both surprised to realize that he was telling the truth and confused by the strange way he displayed the plate. After apologizing for his suspicion, he explained that job holders usually worked under the country or nobles, or they would go to big cities to practice as adventurers. Therefore, it was rare to see them in remote places like this village. Amashiki realized that, just like in Japan or anywhere else, people in this world also move to places where they could best utilize their abilities and earn higher incomes. So the boy's doubts were understandable. Twisting the truth a bit, Amashiki confidently declared that he had been practicing magic in the mountains and wanted to experience village life for a change. Of course, he skillfully omitted the fact that he had come here because he was completely lost in an unfamiliar world. Amashiki had actually just arrived this morning and was desperately searching for signs of civilization. The gatekeeper accepted his answer, thinking that it explained his lack of understanding of common sense. Amashiki felt a little uncomfortable being seen as someone lacking common sense, but his thoughts were interrupted when the boy turned to him and said that he had a request for a craftsman like him to help. The young boy said that he could call him Zozo. The boy then asked him to accompany him to the village chief's house to discuss the details. They soon arrived, a house located on a small hill in the center of the village. The gatekeeper boy eagerly rushed in, asking to speak to the village chief. The old man called out to Zozo. He was overjoyed to hear that a craftsman had come to the village with Zozo. Seeing their excitement as somewhat strange, Amashiki kept his composure as the village chief introduced himself as Esta. He was surprised when Amashiki politely presented his status plate and asked about the request Zozo had mentioned. Turning serious, Esta revealed that a monster called the Silver Wolf had appeared near the village, thus confirming Amashiki's suspicion that the traces he had seen earlier were from a monster attack. While the villagers could handle a few individual monsters, facing a pack of wolves was a huge challenge. Thus, they hoped that a keeper like him could help them exterminate the pack. Zozo went on to explain that there were no other keeper in the village, as all the others were just civilians. This made Amashiki realize how rare it was for job keepers to be in this world. He reasoned that, with the constant threat of monsters, the risk might be high, but the demand for combat jobs was always high. According to Esta and Zozo, silver wolves were wolf-like creatures that moved quickly, had a keen sense of smell, possessed sharp fangs and claws, and had distinctive silver fur. They were ranked E by the Adventurers Guild, the second lowest level of strength. Although a few villagers could defeat a silver wolf, this village was very small, and everyone had to work to sustain their lives. Therefore, if someone was injured while hunting, the consequences would be dire. In addition, someone would always need to stay behind to protect the village, making it nearly impossible for them to deal with a pack of wolves. Amashiki felt uneasy about the monsters disrupting the village's activities, and his ears began to ring as the village chief begged him to accept the mission, promising him a generous reward. He had fought monsters before without the advantage of changing jobs, and moreover, he had decided to strive to advance his career in this world. He would do anything that he thought would benefit him. Standing tall and confident, Amashiki punched his chest and agreed to accept the job. Esta and Zozo immediately praised him enthusiastically, even though he had not yet completed the quest. He found them to be a bit naive, but since he knew nothing about this world and had no money or place to live, he accepted. Amashiki realized that he would have to rely on their help for a while, so he reasoned that it would be best to do them a favor. Without hesitation, he prepared to begin his quest, only to be interrupted by a growling stomach. Somewhat embarrassed, he asked for some food before starting the hunt. The two villagers looked at each other in disbelief when they discovered that he had not even brought food. In no time, Amashiki was well fed and equipped with more practical, tight-fitting adventure clothes for his quest. Although he felt like a cosplayer, he was determined to follow the Silver Wolf. Returning to the forest, he noticed that the plants here were completely different, unlike anything he had seen before, and he wondered if they were edible. He then checked the job list, and finally found the appraiser job. The appraiser job allowed the user to determine the value of any item and check the status of others, with the information obtained changing depending on the level difference. Using his new job, Amashiki scanned a medicinal herb and realized that it had healing properties. He decided to harvest some to sell for profit. While considering using the apothecary and alchemist jobs in the future to make his own medicine and potions, which excited him with the idea. His appraisal skill also allowed him to distinguish a nearly identical but poisonous plant, which he would have likely mistaken otherwise. This made Amashiki extremely grateful to be able to receive accurate information in a world without the internet. Amashiki considered that changing jobs every time he needed something could be quite a hassle. However, he realized that in games, players could level up and then change to another job or a higher level job without losing their previous skills. This seemed to apply to him as well, as he still remembered the knowledge and methods of using magic from his time as a mage, and those skills were still intact. To test it, he tried shooting a stone spear from his fingertip. Surprisingly, he succeeded, although the bullet was much smaller than expected. However, he was overwhelmed by the terrible destruction it caused after being fired. As soon as he felt the great decrease in his magical power, Amashiki was stunned to find himself falling to the ground, unable to stand. Opening his status window, Amashiki confirmed that he had spent 50 MP on just one spell, proving that using magic when not a mage was extremely costly. As he lay on the ground recovering, he realized that using skills that matched his job was the most efficient system, which made sense considering the scoring mechanism. This was an important discovery. He figured that combining magic and swordplay would be extremely powerful in combat, while combining magic with non-combat jobs like appraiser would be ideal for surprise attacks. Despite the high MP consumption, he figured it was worth it. However, Amashiki knew that he needed to increase his level, to increase the amount of MP he could use. Suddenly, Amashiki's hunter sense kicked in. As he sensed the scent of a beast wafting through the air, he quickly hid behind the bushes as 3 ferocious silver wolves appeared. Checking their status, he found that although they had high agility, he was still superior, so he could escape if necessary. Confident in his skills, Amashiki switched to the mage class and created 3 stone spears, then fired them at the wolves from behind the bushes. Caught by surprise, 2 wolves were instantly killed, but he missed the third and only injured its shoulder. The surviving wolf went berserk, turned to face him, and charged at him with sharp teeth exposed. In desperation, Amashiki summoned one last stone spear, aiming at the charging monster at extremely close range. Closing his eyes, he fired and the stone bullet successfully obliterated the monster. Still dazed, Amashiki approached the wolf's corpse and poked it with his finger to make sure it was dead. Relieved when the monster did not move, he fell back, feeling relieved. Immediately after, the lively music played, signaling that he had leveled up again. Opening the status window, he happily clenched his fists as he saw that his level had increased, along with his base stats and maximum MP. Sensing the presence of other members of the pack gathered nearby, Amashiki pondered the strategy of constantly changing jobs to deal with them. With a meaningful smile, he declared that he would turn the monsters into stepping stones in his career. When Amashiki left the village to hunt, Zozo told him that the silver wolf's fangs would be proof of his victory, asking him to collect them. After completing it, he examined the wolf's corpse, noting its determination in a life-or-death fight, something unimaginable in modern, peaceful Japan. From this experience, Amashiki realized that in order to survive in this world, he would have to master the art of changing jobs. In addition, there was another thing that bothered him. During his last level up, he noticed that his stats, especially MP and intelligence, had increased significantly. He believed that this was a direct result of defeating the monster. As a mage, Amashiki realized that the stats would increase differently if he used a sword instead of magic. However, further investigation into this had to be put on hold when he sensed the monster approaching. From the bushes, more silver wolves emerged. Different from the previous 3. These wolves were wary of his presence and were filled with murderous intent. Amashiki realized that he had only faced a group of scouts before, and now it was an entire pack of wolves. Facing the ferocious snarling creatures, he used his mage power to create 8 stone spears. The bullets quickly destroyed 4 wolves, reduced the pack's strength somewhat, but the remaining ones continued to charge. With terrifying speed and ferocity, he launched another attack, barely scratching a finger, but as a wolf corpse fell beside him, he realized that the stone spears had penetrated their targets with more force. Perhaps due to his increased magical power. However, his elation was short-lived, as the surviving silver wolves continued to charge past their fallen comrades, and prepared to pounce on him in a dangerous manner. Amashiki realized that at this distance, he would not be able to cast his spell in time, should quickly change professions and become a swordsman. Withdrawing the sword that the villagers provided, he cut off the first wolf's head with a clean slash. Twirling the sword above his head, he continued to face the last silver wolf. He felt the power surging in his arm. Not to mention the monster's movements now seemed to slow down to him. This is what it feels like to be a swordsman. After defeating the last monster, Amashiki returned his sword to its sheath and stood in the middle of the bloody battlefield. Suddenly, lively music rang out, signaling that he had leveled up once again. Amashiki had leveled up, just as he thought after taking down the last of the silver wolves as a swordsman. This had greatly improved his strength and agility. This confirmed that each job affected the increase in stats differently, meaning he had some control over how his stats improved by changing jobs. This was a great discovery, and Amashiki made a mental note to experiment further when he decided on a direction for his stats. Time passed, and the silence of the forest was only broken by the call of a flock of birds taking flight. Alerted by the sound, Amashiki reached for his sword, but nothing appeared. Nearly an hour after fighting the large pack of wolves, he still hadn't seen any new monsters around. Amashiki realized that it would be unwise to venture deeper into the forest, as it might attract the attention of the remaining wolves in the pack. After taking down 13 new silver wolves, he could rest assured that he had significantly reduced the pack's numbers, and the bag full of fangs was a clear testament to that. Deciding to return to the village, on the way, he returned to the area where he had fought the wolves earlier. Observing a wolf corpse, he was surprised to find that it had not been eaten immediately as he had thought. Taking a closer look, he noticed its fur still in a surprising state. Remembering that Zozo had said that fangs were proof of victory, he began to wonder what other parts of the wolf could be used for. Changing his job to appraiser, he used his skills to learn more about the value of the remaining parts of the wolf carcass. The silver wolf's fur was soft and warm, making it suitable for making clothes and blankets, while its meat, though a bit tough, was full of flavor. Delighted that the remaining parts of the wolves could be used, Amashiki decided not to let anything go to waste. Changing his job to psychic, he used his mind power to lift the wolf carcasses off the ground. He decided to take them all back to the village, as although he could butcher them himself by changing to hunter, he felt he hadn't done enough work for the day and would let the villagers handle it. With that decision, he continued his journey, the wolf carcasses floating behind him creating a strange sight. As he returned to the village, a villager ran out in a panic shouting that there was big trouble, announcing that a monster was coming towards them. Zozo asked if it was the silver wolf, fearing the worst for Amashiki. As the village began to panic, a man said that it was a giant monster, completely different from anything they had seen before. Just then, a giant mass of fur slowly emerged from the forest and appeared in the open area outside the village, causing everyone to scream in horror. What surprised the guards was that they heard mumbling voices coming from inside the creature. Zozo, despite his fear, decided to move forward and brushed aside some of the fur, only to be confronted by an annoyed Amashiki. Amashiki was clearly exhausted, panting heavily as he tried to hold the 11 floating wolf corpses on his way back to the village. Zozo asked Amashiki in horror what those things were. When he realized that they were silver wolves floating around him, Amashiki explained that they were floating because of a spiritual spell he had cast. He realized that seeing actual magic in action must be rare in a remote place like this. Lining up the wolf carcasses, Amashiki began to explain how he had disposed of the pack and brought them back to make use of all their remains. Amashiki brought the wolf carcasses back to the village, thinking that they might be of some use. Zozo commented that his skills were indeed useful. When Esta arrived, Amashiki handed the village chief the bag of fangs as proof of his hunt. He told Esta that he had brought back fangs from 11 silver wolves, but had killed 13 in total. He had checked the area thoroughly to make sure there were no more wolves, and believed that he had broken the pack's formation. The entire village erupted in joy upon hearing this news. Amashiki, surprised by the villagers' excitement, realized that they were probably worried about the threat of wolves, especially since this was a village without warriors. In addition, the significant increase in knowledge of the world around him also made him feel that this was a very productive day. But his thoughts were quickly interrupted by a new development. Zozo excitedly patted Amashiki on the back and shook him vigorously, thanking him profusely for what he had done, although he repeatedly insisted that he was just doing his job. Then, Esta stepped forward, saying that the whole village owed him their lives, and bowed in gratitude. Amashiki was surprised by this, because he had traded his services for a reward and had not expected to receive so many thanks. This brought back memories of the time he had won a big contract with a company, only to be ridiculed by colleagues, and backbiting. At that time, jealousy and mutual humiliation were normal for him. Unable to bear the cheerful atmosphere around him any longer, Amashiki decided to change the situation by asking the villagers if they could handle the wolf carcass dissection. This tactic worked as expected when Zozo and the strongest men in the village stepped forward to take charge, quickly getting to work. The atmosphere immediately changed as the dissection work began, shifting from jubilation to focus and busyness. Esta asked Amashiki what he would do with the materials obtained from the dissection. Although he planned to sell the wolf fur, he decided to give all the meat to the villagers. Esta, along with the villagers, were extremely grateful, as fresh meat was a rare delicacy for them. Soon, the whole village became bustling as everyone prepared for a big feast. A large cauldron was set on fire, and everyone was asked to bring whatever they could from home. Wine was also brought out. For tonight they could drink without having to worry about the threat of the silver wolf. As he sat on the porch watching all this commotion, Amashiki thought to himself that the party had become a real festival. Before he fell to the side, Esta approached him with a worried expression, but he reassured him that he just needed to rest for a bit and asked if he could stay the night. Esta immediately agreed and led him to his home. After removing his adventurer's clothes, Amashiki collapsed onto his bed, ready to rest. This was the first time since coming to this world that he had actually had the chance to relax. He felt he had made a good start and planned to use the village as a base to hunt monsters, level up, and learn more about the world he knew little about. As he awoke, his eyes slowly adjusting to the light, Amashiki was surprised to see light pouring in from the window, thinking that it should be nighttime. He wondered if there was a possibility that this world didn't have nighttime. Amashiki was pulled out of his thoughts by a knock on the door from Esta, who asked him if he was awake. Quickly dressing, he opened the door, and the old man said that he didn't want to wake him up earlier since he was sleeping soundly, which was not surprising after his battle with the silver wolves. Kindly, Esta offered him breakfast. Unfolding a towel, he revealed a wooden tray with freshly baked bread and a milk stew of meat and vegetables. Having not eaten since lunch the day before, Amashiki thanked him and accepted, eagerly beginning to eat. Carefully blowing on the spoonful of food, he tasted the first bite and found the slight sweetness of the milk blending perfectly with the vegetables. He recognized the pieces of carrots and potatoes, feeling his stomach slowly filling up as he scooped up another piece of meat. Amashiki wondered if the meat he was chewing was from the silver wolves he had defeated. As he chewed, he felt the beef-like flavor gradually seep out, blending with the milky scent. It was hard to imagine this flavor coming from such a terrifying-looking creature. The bread seemed to absorb all the moisture in his mouth. But it was perfect when dipped into the stew, creating a delicious combination. The taste was simple, but it was exactly what I needed after a long day. As I ate, I suddenly felt like someone from the past was watching me over my shoulder. But when I turned around, there was no one there. After filling his stomach, Amashiki thanked Esta's wife for the meal. The village chief then led him into another room to present his reward for killing the silver wolves. Opening the money bag, Amashiki poured its contents onto the table and counted 13 silver coins. However, he had absolutely no idea how much they were worth, as he was unfamiliar with the monetary system of this world. He apologized, explaining that he was unfamiliar with the value of money due to having lived in seclusion in the mountains for a long time, and asked Esta to give him a brief explanation. Understanding his circumstances, Esta explained that a few silver coins would be enough to buy a light meal, enough to fill his stomach. However, Amashiki still felt as confused as before. After asking a few more questions, he decided to convert the currencies in his mind according to a certain ratio. Iron coins, 10 yen copper coins, 100 yen silver coins, 1,000 yen gold coins, 10,000 yen and finally, large gold coins worth 1 million yen. With the money he had, Amashiki realized that his entire fortune was only worth about 13,000 yen, and he concluded that he should aim for large gold coins if he wanted to improve his financial situation. Esta explained that the Adventurers Guild set the reward for each silver wolf at 1 silver coin, and while the price might vary depending on the region, they always adhered to this standard. Amashiki took note of this information, while Esta emphasized that lying or haggling over the price could bring the village into disrepute. This could lead to travelers or adventurers refusing to accept the village's quests, losing vital support. Contemplating this, Amashiki realized that if that happened, no one would come to the village's aid, making this a matter of life and death for them. If they did not follow the rules, the village could take advantage of people like Amashiki's ignorance of the standard price. Village Chief Esta then gave him payment for the 11 wolf furs he had brought back. After counting the money, Amashiki realized it was over 50 copper coins. Esta explained that the usual price was 8 copper coins per fur, but they had adjusted the price to compensate for the damage caused by the battle. Amashiki reassured the old man, saying that he did not care about the value of the material. If he were still working in Japan, he would have negotiated the price, but here, he understood that fairness was of utmost importance to the village. Amashiki realized that Esta was the first person he had interacted with since coming to this world, and although money was important, he did not want to strain their relationship. With a slight hesitation, Village Chief Esta continued to make another request to his guest. He revealed that some villagers had been injured by the silver wolf and were in need of medicine, but the village was short of the dosel herb, the main ingredient for making medicine. Amashiki immediately recognized that these were the herbs he had picked in the forest a few days ago. He thought that he could heal their wounds by changing his profession to priest, but was concerned that it might be seen as over-interference and diminish their gratitude. Respecting the villagers' ways, he decided to do it their way, and gave the village chief the dosel herbs he had collected. The old man Esta was surprised to learn that Amashiki had even collected herbs while hunting, commenting that he had left nothing to complain about. Amashiki tried to brush off the compliment, but Esta quickly headed for the door, offering to take the herbs to the pharmacist's house immediately. Amashiki was surprised to hear that there was another profession holder in the village, but the old man quickly explained that this woman was not a professional pharmacist. This left Amashiki somewhat disappointed, as he had hoped to learn more information from a real pharmacist. Esta knocked on the door of a house, and a small old woman, leaning on a cane, opened the door loudly. She immediately scolded in a reproachful tone that she could not make medicine without the dosel herb. Amashiki was taken aback by the old woman's harsh words, but Esta quickly called her Gerda and revealed that they had brought the herb. The old woman snapped back that he should have said so in the first place, then invited them into the house. As he stepped through the threshold, Amashiki was immediately assaulted by a barrage of scents from the herbs that were stored in the house. Gerda gestured with her finger, demanding that he hand over the herbs to her. Amashiki quickly complied, and the old woman examined them carefully. Gerda confirms that these are indeed dosel herbs, and that she can use them to make medicine for the injured. She adds that if he brings the wrong pseudozol, a fake herb, she will not hesitate to teach him a lesson. Amashiki, as if sitting in a classroom, raises her hand and prepares to ask a question. Amashiki asks the old woman if she can make medicine without the apothecary profession. Gerda responds by angrily pointing her stick at him, loudly stating that anyone with the necessary knowledge and skills can make medicine. Just like one does not need to be a chef to cook. Realizing that she is right, Amashiki wonders what the difference is between having and not having a profession, and questions the benefits of having the apothecary profession. However, Gerda frankly admits that she does not know much about it. She explains that the profession naturally imparts knowledge, allowing the practitioner to know how to craft, collect, and mix ingredients efficiently. From there, Amashiki came to the conclusion that in this world, a profession not only brings skills but also optimizes and enhances the user's knowledge. Amashiki thanked Gerda and turned to leave. But the old woman insisted on keeping him to help, saying that she needed a man to assist in making medicine. Esta, without hesitation, left him and left. Not long after, Amashiki groaned and gritted his teeth, while trying to grind the herbs in the mortar and pestle. When he finished, he presented the mixture to Gerda, and the old woman somewhat accepted, then gave him another mortar with fresh herbs inside to grind again, making him extremely uncomfortable. He thought to himself that they only needed dosel, so he didn't understand why he had to do unrelated work. While angrily grinding the new herbs, Amashiki muttered complaints that all he was doing was hard work, instead of learning how to make medicine like he had hoped. Old Lady Gerda then told Amashiki to use the stone mill after finishing grinding, not forgetting to shout at him to continue working. Exhausted, Amashiki decided to change a bit to test how much the profession could improve efficiency. He activated the pharmacist profession, immediately attracting Gerda's attention. Now, he could clearly understand the role of each herb. Not to mention using the apothecary's tools became extremely easy. Gerda, with a bit of doubt, commented that his sudden progress was strange, but Amashiki was fascinated by his new skills. Now, he understood how to adjust his body to better suit the working process. Amashiki excitedly asked Gerda if they were going to dry the herbs, and offered to help. He then used the special magical skill that only apothecaries possessed to quickly dry the herbs, and then gave them to her with a bright smile. Gerda, however, was not convinced. She stared at him suspiciously, reminding him that he had said he was a mage, and that mages did not have the magic to dry herbs instantly. The smile on Amashiki's face instantly vanished. He felt the tension in the air and quickly explained that his main profession was a job changer, allowing him to change from mage to apothecary. Gerda was stunned to hear this, and when Amashiki asked if it was strange, she angrily declares, "Of course it's strange." She even remarks that even his appearance looks different. Gerda yells that changing jobs on a whim is unheard of, and tells him to use common sense, which Amashiki finds ironic in a world filled with swords and magic. After calming down, she explains that jobs are something that people are born with, and that no one can choose or change them. This makes Amashiki realize that his previous belief, that it's possible to change jobs at temples or churches like in video games, is wrong. While there are geniuses who can master their jobs and reach higher levels, changing jobs is fundamentally impossible, even for them. Realizing that even with all her knowledge, Gerda knows nothing about job changers, Amashiki begins to believe that his job may be the only one in this world. Gerda warns him to be careful in how he uses this power, which he agrees to with a knowing smile. Gerda remarks that if he were a pharmacist now, he would be a valuable asset in combat. Amashiki was taken aback by this statement, not wanting to help further or agree to any further requests at this point, so he made an excuse that he was not yet qualified. However, Gerda was persistent. She asked what his current level was, and emphasized that being a level 1 pharmacist was all the more reason for him to try. She explained that, even at a low level, the more knowledge and experience he gathered, the more medicines he could create, and that required him to put in his best effort. After saying that, she went into her herb storehouse. Gerda commented that in a world where survival was paramount, learning more about medicine was not a bad thing for him. Gerda threw a pile of herbs at Amashiki, leaving no room for any objection in her words. At this moment, Amashiki finally realized that this old woman was indeed a witch. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a horned rabbit walked gently among the rays of sunlight filtering through the leaves, enjoying the peace without a care in the world around it. Another rabbit was nibbling on chestnuts, making it crave, and decided to challenge his opponent for the prize. After a brief horning contest, the first rabbit won and proudly claimed his prize. But before he could enjoy it, it was taken down with a single arrow from Amashiki's bow. While the other horned rabbit fled in panic, Amashiki triumphantly raised his prey as the music played, signaling that he had leveled up once more. He had lived in this village for a week, going into the forest every day to hunt any monsters that appeared on his way. His main prey were horned rabbits, whose soft and juicy meat could be prepared into many delicious dishes, making them an irresistible choice on the dining table. And the reason for this lifestyle? It all started when he was exploited by Gerda, the village's so-called pharmacist, in her job. On his way home, Amashiki felt frustrated about his life as a job changer, constantly looking for battles and now being cornered like this. Just then, Zozo and some villagers approached, saying that they were on their way to the village's hunting grounds and asked for his help in solving a big problem they were facing. Amashiki decided to come along, believing that his hunter skills could help the village in other ways as well. They began to check the hunting traps that the villagers had set. The hunting traps that the villagers had set were all untouched, and they couldn't understand why this was happening, especially after the silver wolves had been exterminated. Some wondered if the creatures might have changed their feeding grounds. Amashiki remained silent, but his hunter instincts helped him sense the panic among the animals and smaller monsters. He believed that his profession might help him understand the cause of this abnormality. Thanks to the vast knowledge that the hunter profession brought, Amashiki deduced that another pack was trying to invade the area. The villagers began to panic. But he reassured them that the threat might not be immediate, but it would be best to be careful of a certain side of the village. The villagers returned home disappointed that they had caught nothing, but Amashiki decided to continue searching the forest and hunting for a while longer. Thanks to that, he had reached level 8 and his hunter profession had reached level 5. However, he found that leveling up had become more difficult, making him wonder if he should leave this place and find a new place. Although the appearance of new monster hordes was a concern, he was still a guest in this village, and hesitated to make the decision to leave. While he was wondering, he noticed that the village was especially bustling today. When he entered the village, he was surprised to see a group of merchants selling goods to the villagers. Zozo approached him, confirming that a caravan of merchants had just arrived to supply the villagers with goods. The goods the caravan brought were things that could not be found in the area, including spices, high-quality fabrics, pots, and weapons. Amashiki felt excited, knowing that merchants often traveled from place to place, and would leave as soon as they finished trading in the village. This gave him the opportunity to join the caravan to go to new lands. He took the appearance of the caravan, just as he was considering his next move, as a sign of fate urging him to leave. As Zozo approached, Amashiki simply handed him the horned rabbit's corpse, then hurriedly ran to a nearby merchant, requesting to be taken to their leader to speak. The merchant agreed, signaling to a well-dressed man named Giselle, who was taking inventory of his goods inside one of the carriages. After sitting down, Giselle told Amashiki that they would be departing for Rassel City in 2 days and invited him to join the group. When Amashiki accepted, the merchant offered him assistance in protecting the group on the way, noting that having a tradesman like him would be very trustworthy. Amashiki wondered how the man knew he was a tradesman even though he had never mentioned it. But he soon deduced that they must have gathered information from the villagers while trading, which was perfectly reasonable for a merchant's way of doing things. For him, this was not a bad deal at all. Amashiki agreed to take on the role of escort, and the merchant announced that they would depart early in the morning 2 days later, extending his hand to shake his. Amashiki is surprised to find out that shaking hands is also a form of greeting in this world. But his thoughts are quickly interrupted when Zozo approaches after hearing everything. Amashiki tells Zozo that he just decided things on a whim, But when he sees the boy upset that he is leaving the village, he suddenly remembers one of the many times he quit his job in Japan. When he declared that there was nothing holding him back anymore, Zozo pulls Amashiki out of his thoughts when he notices that he is distracted. Amashiki apologizes for not discussing it with him beforehand, then excitedly reveals that he wants to explore more of the world and become stronger. Finding this motivation cool, the boy pats him on the shoulder in a friendly manner, saying that while he is sad that he is leaving the village, he respects his decision, as it is his life to experience for himself. When Zozo wished him a safe journey, Amashiki thought that the boy was truly a good person, and he was glad that Zozo was the first person he met in this world. Amashiki then went to Esta's house to inform him of his decision. Although he felt a little regretful about leaving, he appreciated even more the way the village chief was always ready to answer his naive questions without any discomfort. Having bowed his head, Amashiki apologized for leaving after all that Esta had done for him. But contrary to his expectations, the old man only placed a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him that he had helped the village overcome the crisis and contributed a lot. He said that they were the ones who owed him, his words filled with warmth and gratitude. Next, Amashiki visits Gerda, and true to her grumpy nature, she only comments dryly about his departure. The profession of apothecary was the highest level he had reached, and whether it was through her harsh training, her exploitation, or even her abuse, he knew he had learned a lot from her. He reflected on the experience, noting that it was an important lesson, to be careful about revealing one's potential for career change. Despite her unappealing appearance, Amashiki realized that, amidst the heavy work Gerda had given him, she had imparted to him a knowledge that was probably of a higher level in the profession of apothecary. He also understood that her skills could even rival that of a true practitioner. He didn't know how many years it had taken her to accumulate that amount of knowledge and experience, but when using the abilities of a keeper, Amashiki felt like he was tapping into a collective intelligence, including the experience that someone like Gerda had accumulated over the years. Gerda commented that he seemed reluctant to leave, and when he denied it, she only smiled meaningfully. She then declared that they had to cram more knowledge into him before he left. She signaled for the merchants to bring in bags full of newly purchased herbs, and reminded him that he didn't have much time before his departure. Gerda ordered Amashiki to start immediately. So, even though he didn't have much luggage or preparation, he was still caught up in helping Gerda until the last minute. On the morning of his departure, Amashiki joined the merchants, and the villagers gathered at the gate to see him off. Amashiki was surprised to see so many people, but a merchant remarked that this was natural, since he had become a benefactor to them. Everyone warmly bid him farewell, wishing him well. Amashiki smiled, before getting into the carriage and setting off. Staying any longer might cause him to lose his sharpness, which was unlike him. But he was truly happy that this village had become his starting point. Might cause him to lose his sharpness, which was unlike him. In this world, Amashiki's peaceful moments of contemplation did not last long, when he sensed a new pack of silver wolves approaching. The merchants panicked at the sudden threat, and immediately whipped their horses into a full gallop. Acting quickly, Amashiki told them to keep their horses moving while he would deal with the threat and clear the way. He realized that the silver wolves were targeting the horses and had set up an ambush just as he had predicted. Ready for his final mission, Amashiki changed his job to a mage, summoning stone spears from the ground, piercing through several of the pursuing wolves. He continued to fire more spears at other targets. And when a wolf tried to close in on the side of the carriage, Amashiki leaped out of the carriage, while the young merchants held him back, and finished off the last wolf with a well-aimed arrow. Giselle praised him for dispersing the wolf pack, offering to stop the horse so he could collect his reward. However, Amashiki advised him to continue on his journey, as he did not want to delay a busy merchant for a small reward. Unsaid, Amashiki was actually looking forward to the new place, hoping to gain more experience there. As the carriage continued to roll down the paved road towards Russell, Amashiki spent some time chatting with the young merchants in the caravan, between loads of goods. One of them commented on his briefcase, finding it unusual and suggesting that he sell it for a profit. However, Amashiki refused, not wanting to part with his belongings. The conversation ended when Giselle, who was driving the carriage, announced that he could see Russell in the distance. Poking his head out from behind the carriage, Amashiki was fascinated by the view before him. The vast medieval city of Russell, surrounded by sturdy walls, came into view. As he approached one of the gates, he noticed a long line of guards with spears standing in front of him, checking those entering the city. His excitement quickly turned to worry when Amashiki realized that he had no papers or proof of his identity in this world. The thought of being arrested and imprisoned right at the gate made him panic a little. Amashiki asked Giselle if he needed anything to enter the city. The merchant cheerfully said that he only needed to present his status to the guard and pay the entrance fee of 100 gold. Relieved, Amashiki continued to observe the crowd, and noticed that some people only needed to present some kind of ID card, and were immediately let through by the guard without having to pay the fee. Giselle explained that those people were adventurers, and that the fee was waived for those who had registered with the Adventurers Guild and possessed a membership card. The same privilege also applied to those who belonged to the Merchants Guild, as was the case with Giselle and his fellow merchants. The merchants carried a certificate confirming their status. Amashiki appreciated the convenience of this system, remarking that for occupations that frequently traveled like adventurers or merchants, paying a fee every time they entered or exited the city would be a heavy burden. When it was his turn, Amashiki presented his status board to the smiling guard. He presented the board with his usual formal manner. Although the board displayed the job as job changer with the brackets mage, Amashiki knew that others should only see the mage job. This he had confirmed many times with Gerda back in the village. The guard commented that it was rare to meet a job holder, and then asked him if he intended to become an adventurer. When Amashiki confirmed that he indeed wanted to spend some time as an adventurer in the city, the guard welcomed him as a member of the city. After the merchant caravan was cleared, the group entered the city. Hearing that Amashiki wanted to work at the Adventurers Guild, Giselle kindly offered to take him closer to the guild headquarters by carriage, for which he was grateful. Amashiki's goal was to master all the jobs and build a good life, even though he was in a different world. His approach to life remained unchanged, and in this new situation, defeating monsters was the fastest way to achieve his goal. Furthermore, being able to do freelance activities in this world was a great thing for Amashiki, as he had not been able to do so in his previous life in Japan, where freelancing was often considered a form of unemployment. Upon reaching their destination, Giselle thanked Amashiki for escorting him and the merchants to the city safely, and presented him with a reward, which Amashiki accepted with a polite bow. Smiling, Amashiki asked what the merchants would do next. As they hurriedly unloaded the goods from the carriage, Giselle announced that they would be embarking on another journey right after restocking, as transportation and trading were their main occupations. Amashiki was surprised by their speed of work and the fact that they would not be resting at all in the city. He wished them good luck, shook hands with Giselle, and then bid farewell to the merchants. With his familiar briefcase in hand, Amashiki walked along the stone-paved road towards the Adventurers Guild. On the way, he came into contact with many non-human species living in this fantasy world, including elves, beastmen, lizardmen, and dwarves. Finally, he came to a large stone building, with a coat of arms depicting a windflower on a checkerboard background, hanging proudly above the large double doors. Crossing the threshold, Amashiki found himself in a large hall, filled with tables, chairs, bookshelves, notice boards, and a reception desk. Crossing the threshold, Amashiki found himself in a large hall, filled with tables, chairs, bookshelves, notice boards, and a reception desk, and ran his fingers over the desk, noticing that it was spotlessly clean. Having firmly believed that an organization with a clean entrance was always trustworthy, he judged the Adventurers Guild to be not bad. However, he did not realize how strange he looked to the adventurers passing by. His thoughts were interrupted when a woman in uniform, wearing the guild's insignia on her beret, called out to the next person in line. As he approached the counter, he was welcomed to the Rassel branch of the Adventurers Guild by a beautiful girl. She introduced herself as Lucia, an employee of this establishment. Amashiki also introduced himself and said that he came to register as an adventurer. The girl asked him to pay 500 gold for registration and present his status, while taking out some papers from the drawer. When checking Amashiki's status, Lucia was surprised to see that he was a mage, a job holder. She stated that there was no need to worry about his fighting ability, nor was there any problem with his age or level, so they could proceed with the registration. Luisa brought out a magic box, telling him to put his status plate inside to issue his membership card. Not long after, the membership card was created, and when Amashiki picked it up to check. The guild's ranking system consisted of 7 levels, from S to F, with S being the highest. Achieving the highest level was not easy and only a few people achieved it. These high-ranking individuals were all job holders, including prestigious jobs like Dragon Knight. Luisa continued to explain, mentioning other prominent figures like Tylan, a beast tamer named Odonie, and especially the Holy Knight Stefia, a legendary warrior with a 1,000-year-old appearance. Although not an adventurer, Stefia was a temple knight, and according to Lucia, temple knights with high-ranking jobs like hers often possess skills on par with those who had reached S rank. Amashiki couldn't help but applaud at Lucia's passionate explanation, impressed by her passion for her work and her deep understanding. Lucia also mentioned that the method to attain a high-ranking job was a closely guarded secret, but Amashiki, as a job changer, knew how to do it. However, he was not at the level to do so yet, but achieving a high-level profession was a goal he wanted to aim for in the future. At the end of the explanation, Lucia thanked him for listening. Lucia tells Amashiki that he will start with F-rank quests since he just registered. However, since he is a job holder, he can still take on quests. She also explains that he will be able to take on higher rank quests if he gathers a team of companions. As they watch a group of enthusiastic adventurers prepare to take on a new quest, Lucia notes that the guild discourages taking on extra quests unless he is with a trustworthy party. Lucia explains that the Adventurers Guild will decide on promotions based on how well he completes quests, and may demote him if the results are unsatisfactory. Hearing this, Amashiki compared the Adventurers Guild to a recruitment agency that connects adventurers with clients. Amashiki commented that the guild could not afford to let those who were not suited to their rank take on higher-level quests and fail them repeatedly. Demotion if your skills do not match your rank may sound harsh in this world, but for someone who had experienced capitalist society like Amashiki in Japan, it was a daily occurrence. With a hint of nostalgia, he recalled a former colleague who used to brag in front of his boss and get promoted, but was later demoted when he was discovered to be a liar, losing all respect from everyone around him. After hearing Lucia's full explanation, Amashiki bowed his head in thanks, causing her to blush in surprise. Noticing this, he asked if something was wrong. Lucia admitted that she was a little surprised to see him being so humble despite being a keeper. Amashiki was surprised to receive such a reaction just for showing respect for her work, and he recalled how he had been praised rather unusually in the village for his polite behavior. He wondered how many other keeper had an unpleasant attitude, commenting that they were definitely strong, and that if one was born with such strength, it wouldn't be surprising if they became arrogant and thought they were superior to others. Amashiki didn't want to be the type of person who used his status as a keeper to overwhelm others, but then he wondered if this very thought was a form of implicit bragging. His train of thought was interrupted by Lucia calling him back to reality. Amashiki turned his attention to the notice boards in the main hall. Although he had no intention of accepting the quest right away, he was curious to see what they included. He noticed that there were notices for various quests such as hunting monsters, gathering herbs, cleaning the streets, delivering goods, running errands, and even taking care of others, showing that the Adventurers Guild really did take on all sorts of jobs. He took particular notice of a quest to care for the elderly, noting that it required a specific job. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that the quest involved assisting an elderly elf and required a level 80 sage job or higher, along with a hefty reward. Looking at the quest, he realized that it was an A-rank quest, a great challenge. Amashiki was excited at the prospect of being able to earn such a lot of money as an adventurer. Earning such a large sum of money was one of the benefits of freelancing, and perhaps due to his job changer nature, he was extremely excited to see so many opportunities before him. He resolved to take on as many missions as possible, starting tomorrow, focusing on furthering his career. As he walked down the streets of Rassel, Amashiki was a little confused as he searched for the inn that Giselle had recommended. He finally found a 2-story building with a sign hanging on the door that read, "The Tiger Cat Inn." After determining that this was the place he needed to go, he entered. Amashiki recalled that Giselle had told him that this place had cute staff. And he wondered what the staff would be like. Back in Japan, a colleague had recommended a place to Amashiki that advertised that it had cute staff and absolute privacy, saying that he would enjoy it. But it turned out to be a completely different type of facility, and this memory still made him feel bitter. This stream of unhappy memories was interrupted when a gentle voice greeted him. Turning around, he saw a childlike beast girl waving and inviting him in. Amashiki immediately relaxed when he realized that this was what Giselle meant by cute staff. He nodded in agreement with that assessment and asked about the accommodation service. The beast girl informed him that a night without meals cost 600 gold, and he could order any food he liked in the dining room. Amashiki was satisfied with the price and nodded in agreement. Amashiki made a reservation a week in advance and was informed by the beast girl that the cost would be 4,200 gold. She then asked him to write her name in the guest book, offering to do it for him if he couldn't write. As he wrote his name, the beast girl watched with interest as the brush moved across the page. After reading his name, she introduced herself as Nola. After completing the formalities, Nola happily led him upstairs, saying that since Giselle had introduced him here, she would prepare something special for him later. Seeing Nola's cheerful attitude, Amashiki understood why Giselle was so enthusiastic about introducing this place. Turning the key, she opened the door to his room, and Amashiki saw a rather spacious room. Light poured in from the window, and the inside was furnished with a bed, desk, chair, and wardrobe. Amashiki felt very excited. This room was much more spacious than the cramped room he had lived in since he was young in Japan. Judging from the layout, he also guessed that it would be much more comfortable to live in. When he praised the room, Nola excitedly said that she always made sure to clean it thoroughly. Every day, Nola cleaned the room, because they didn't want any room to be dirty or smelly. Which made Amashiki very satisfied. He speculated that, with their keen sense of smell, beastmen would definitely like to keep things clean. However, another thought suddenly came to his mind. He had been traveling for a week, and despite wiping himself with hot water, he wasn't sure if he was smelly. Slightly uncomfortable with the thought, he asked Nola if there was a place to bathe in town. She smiled sweetly and confirmed that there was. Soon, Amashiki found himself in a large medieval-style public bathhouse, much larger than he had imagined. Walking through the vaulted corridors, with towels and basins provided by the facility, Amashiki realized that the place could accommodate up to 50 or even 100 people at a time. A large circular bath in particular caught his eye. And he noticed a sign warning of deep water, making him wonder why there was such a bath. His doubts were immediately dispelled when a large lizardman walked by, entered the bath, and soaked in the warm water. He quickly realized that there were many types of baths here, designed to serve different races. He then chose a shallow bath for dwarves and soaked in it. Amashiki found his first experience in a public bath in another world interesting. However, he reminded himself not to get too excited, as in a bathhouse, proper behavior was required. Amashiki was distracted for a moment by the small bath for naughty elves. But then noticed that the other bathers had started washing their hair. He noticed that the pink color of the shampoo provided was quite unusual. As both dwarves and beastmen used it, he wondered if it was suitable for humans. He switched to a praiser to examine the ingredients of the products. From there, he learned that the shampoo was made from milky fluid, had a pleasant scent, excellent cleansing ability, and was designed to give balanced, healthy hair. The bath soap was made from fruits by alchemists, and was recommended for human use. Although he felt a little uncomfortable knowing that the shampoo was made from bodily fluids, he chose not to think too much about it and told himself that it must have come from some adorable creature. He then poured some shampoo into his hand and began to rub it evenly through his hair. Amashiki noticed the shampoo's light floral scent, not too unpleasant or out of place. Even for a man. It also made his hair extremely smooth. He then walked to another pool of water, but when he dipped his feet in, he found the water too hot for him. Even when he wanted to dilute it with cold water, the tap was blocked by a burly, scarred man who looked like a regular customer. As a newcomer to the town, he remembered the saying, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do," and decided to endure. Slowly immersed himself in the water. The burning sensation spread throughout his body, making him wince. Noticing his discomfort, the muscular man moved aside, smiling and pointing at a suspicious-looking colorful button on the wall. When Amashiki pressed the button, a strong stream of water poured down from a demon right above him, startling him for a moment. Feeling a hint of magical power, he wondered if this bathhouse was heating the water with a magic circle built into the wall. He thought that perhaps this was what they called a magical tool. Both he and the muscular man relaxed under the water, Amashiki commenting that life in a town in another world was more comfortable than he had expected. He really needed a proper bath, and the hot water felt like it was washing away all the fatigue from his journey. The magically heated water seemed to relax everyone, regardless of race. Even in another world, public baths were still a place that brought comfort. Feeling his body rejuvenated, Amashiki stood up, ready for tomorrow's adventures. But when he noticed a lizardman relaxing in a jacuzzi, he didn't want to miss the chance to experience something new. Amashiki walked to the bathtub next to him and pressed the button, immediately being thrown away for not reading the warning signs on the wall. After a good night's sleep at the Tiger Cat Inn, he went down to the breakfast room. Nola greeted him cheerfully, asking if he had slept well and what he would like for breakfast. She suggested wild boar steak, and Amashiki agreed to her suggestion. Nola called her father, a large lion beastman, to prepare the steak, while her mother took care of the vegetables. The father immediately set to work, and after a short while, Amashiki was seated in front of a large plate with a giant steak, a hot drink, and a bowl of salad. Amashiki watched Nola carry heavy trays across the room as if it were nothing, realizing how surprisingly strong this beastman was for her young age. As he began to eat, he found the steak to be extremely delicious. The meat had perfect marbling, without the unpleasant smell of the wolf meat he had eaten not long ago. Eating steak for breakfast was truly beyond his imagination, since he was used to Japanese cuisine. However, his reminiscence was interrupted by a troublesome customer who loudly demanded that Nola quickly serve him first, considering himself more important than a normal adventurer. His arrogance was quickly extinguished when Nola's father emerged from the kitchen, holding two giant swords in his hands, with a threatening look in his eyes. Amashiki had to help restrain him by breaking the troublesome customer's arm. After a leisurely job change and breakfast, Amashiki headed to the Adventurers Guild. He was surprised to see a huge fight going on inside, as adventurers fought over the quest slips. Lucia greeted him and calmly explained that the quest registration forms were posted early in the morning, so the guild was usually crowded at this time. She also explained that such fights were common. When one adventurer loudly announced that he had been waiting at the guild gates since the night before to claim a quest, Lucia quickly quelled the fight by sternly reminding him that she had warned him earlier. Those who stayed up all night would not be given priority. Amashiki, who did not want to get involved in the battle, was told by Lucia that he could accept a mission directly from her. She gave him a mission to collect dozle herbs. Amashiki accepted the mission, much to Lucia's delight, and quickly began the paperwork. She explained that dozle herbs were hard to find and highly sought after, often falling into shortages. Therefore, the association needed missions like this to be completed. Hearing this, Amashiki excitedly declared that he would collect as many herbs as possible, which pleased Lucia and the staff of the association. He then took a rented basket and prepared to leave. Before he left, Lucia reminded him that even though he was a retainer, he was still just registered, so he needed to prioritize his own safety first. Amashiki nodded in agreement, understanding the importance of listening to others in a professional environment. With a skill he wanted to test out as a pharmacist, he planned to collect as many dozle herbs as possible, in order to impress the association, build a solid profile and take on bigger missions in the future. With this goal in mind, he eagerly began his work. As an F-rank adventurer, Amashiki went to the shallow areas of the forest to collect dozle herb, which grow in less deep areas of the forest. The reward was 50 gold per plant, with a minimum requirement of 10 plants to complete the mission. In addition, if he completed it successfully, he would receive a bonus of 200 gold. In total, he would earn 700 gold, just enough to cover the cost of staying at the Tiger Cat Inn each day. Amashiki realized that the profit from this mission was almost negligible, so he decided to change his profession to apothecary to optimize his work efficiency. This profession provided starting skills such as enhancing medicinal effects and making medicine. But at level 10, he unlocked the herb detection skill. Using this skill, he can quickly detect dozle herbs, identifying them by their distinctive red light, and distinguish them from fake dozle herbs. This skill also allows him to find herbs in the most unlikely places. Although this skill cannot detect herbs that he has not collected before, he is confident that it will make him a champion in herb collecting. At the end of the day, Amashiki returns to the Adventurers Guild, where he is greeted by Lucia. She asks if he has collected enough herbs. He confirmed this by unloading 2 large sacks, containing about 200 dozle herbs. Lucia and her colleagues were stunned by the amount of dozle herbs that Amashiki had brought back. Upon inspection, they wondered how he had collected so many in just one morning. After deciding to count the herbs, they finally confirmed that he had brought back 206 dozle. Lucia wondered how he had collected so many without being a pharmacist, suspiciously asking if he was really a mage. Anticipating this question, Amashiki explained that he had undergone rigorous training under the guidance of a pharmacist living in the remote area, specifically mentioning Gerda as the reason for his herb-gathering skills. Lucia, accepting his explanation, immediately blushed and apologized for losing her temper. After confirming that he had completed the required amount, Lucia confirmed that the quest had been completed and asked if he would like to sell the remaining 196 dozle herbs to the guild. Amashiki agreed, and in doing so he earned a total of 10,300 gold. A truly impressive amount for an adventurer. He recalled the times he silently, or sometimes not so silently, cursed at Gerda's constant overwork as an apothecary. But as it turned out, upgrading his profession wasn't a waste at all. Since he still had time, he took on 2 more quests. Collecting Kirik herbs and Svale herbs, which made the guild staff a little worried, but made Lucia extremely happy. Lucia asked if he planned to collect large quantities of Kirik and Svale herbs like before. Amashiki nodded, affirming that these herbs were necessary for many different purposes, causing the guild staff to pale at the thought of having to count large quantities again. Soon after, he returned to the guild, carrying large sacks full of herbs. As the staff struggled to count them, Lucia gently suggested that he should try taking on a monster extermination quest. Pretending to be humble, Amashiki replied that an ordinary adventurer like him should usually start with gathering quests like he had been doing. But Lucia did not accept this excuse, forcefully slamming the 2 extermination quests on the table. Lucia enthusiastically declared that he was not an ordinary adventurer, emphasizing that she had never heard of an F-rank adventurer who could gather hundreds of herbs in just half a day. Amashiki, however, remained hesitant, asking if Rassel was lacking herbs, and confessed that he quite enjoyed gathering herbs in the forest. Lucia asserted that thanks to him, this problem had been solved. She firmly stated that he was clearly not an ordinary F-rank adventurer, noting that the association did not want to see talented individuals go to waste. She then offered him a monster extermination quest to promote his rank, explaining that the association believed that his promotion would be no problem if he completed a few more quests. The prospect of a promotion completely changed Amashiki's attitude, and he eagerly jumped at the chance to take on a monster extermination quest, determined to defeat any monster that stood in the way of his promising career advancement. Excited, he asked which quest he should take. Lucia gave him 2 quests. To exterminate a kobold and a red boar. He decided to take on both at once. Lucia was surprised but still agreed, noting that for a mage like him, this might be okay. However, she did not forget to warn him to be careful. Having been transported to this world, where he had faced the mysterious giant mantis and slain many monsters, including the silver wolf, Amashiki believed that he had surpassed the level of a beginner adventurer. Both kobolds and red wild boars were common monsters, so he began to wonder which one he should pursue first. Amashiki's train of thought was suddenly interrupted when he realized that he had been collecting herbs out of habit, instead of focusing on the monster extermination mission. He reminded himself to be vigilant, as it wouldn't be unusual for monsters to appear at any time from here on out. And as expected, he immediately came face to face with a red wild boar. The beast charged at him as soon as they saw each other, but Amashiki quickly dispatched it with a stone spear straight to the head. Celebrating his small victory, he realized that this was the source of the steak he had eaten. But this discovery had to wait as 2 more wild boars suddenly rushed out of the bushes and attacked. They were also quickly taken down by stone spears protruding from the ground. Completing the first extermination mission without a scratch. Amashiki collected the boar tusks as proof of completing the quest. When he checked his stats, he found that he had increased the stats appropriate for the mage profession, and also leveled up the profession. While he recognized this as a positive thing, he also admitted that this might have made his abilities a bit biased. As a job changer, his strength lies in his ability to adapt and flexibly use different professions. The more trump cards he has, the stronger he will become. With that in mind, Amashiki decided to test this ability in the kobold extermination quest. Amashiki quickly came face to face with a kobold, a half-human, half-dog monster, and began to attack. He changed his job to a thief, charging at the enemy with his face covered, snatching the spear from its claws before it could even realize what was happening. The monster stared at its empty hand in shock, but Amashiki quickly switched to Spear Warrior and used its own weapon to attack, easily taking it down with a single thrust, sending it flying backwards. He then turned his attention to its surviving companions, confident that he could handle them. Spinning his spear skillfully, he blocked the first kobold's attack and knocked it back, then turned to face the second, slamming it to the ground with a quick sweep of his spear. As the monster fell, he quickly finished it off with a stab through the chest, defeating the last enemy. Standing on the bloody battlefield, Amashiki smiled smugly, completing the second extermination mission. Returning to the Adventurers Guild, he presented the boar tusk and kobold tail as proof to Lucia, reporting his success to her. Lucia happily congratulated Amashiki and announced that he had officially been promoted to E rank. Along with admiration, as she said that he was the first person to rank up so quickly after registering at the guild, an incredible achievement. Surprised, Amashiki said that this was not too uncommon for a job holder, but Lucia retorted that even as a job holder, not everyone could complete the mission so quickly. She also said that the fastest rank-up record in other branches also took 10 days. Amashiki realized this was a great achievement seeing the enthusiasm of the association staff, but still humbly told Lucia that he planned to continue trying and aim for D rank. This prompted her to tease him, saying that E rank was just the beginning. With a higher goal of S rank, Amashiki confidently struck a victory pose. Amashiki was pulled back to reality when Lucia said that monster extermination quests would increase from E rank onwards. She advised him to always carry recovery potions and healing potions with him. Coming to his senses, he remembered that potions were magical items crafted by alchemists. Although he could make them himself, he wanted to see these products with his own eyes to study them and serve his goals. He asked Lucia where he could buy potions, and she directed him to a shop run by an alchemist, located north of the guild, along the main road.